A very good morning to all of you. First of all, a big thanks to Dr. Shinu and the entire REVA team, university team who invited me. There's one area that we always talk about in the country in India is the gap between academia and industry. And I think forums like this hosted by an academic institution like REVA University and bringing in such a diverse array of technologists and business leaders from the industry will hopefully bridge that gap. So good morning to all of you. Thank you for joining us here in the morning session in Bangalore despite the traffic. So I head the Data Security Council of India, which is an 11-year-old organization, particularly focused as a policy think tank and a capability building institution in data protection, privacy, and cybersecurity. So in my today's session, I will not be talking about the entire landscape or the risks of cyber, the cyber crimes, what is the next big malware that's likely to hit a power grid or a payment gateway system. I'm going to talk about the digital, which I think my senior colleague Dilip from the industry and also a NASCOM EC member set the context right on in terms of the digital wave, how every user enterprise is actually becoming a tech company. So I will take off from there on talking about the digital wave and the digital momentum that is happening all over the world and in India. And from there, look at what is the innovation ecosystem and the innovation landscape that we are witnessing globally in the area of cybersecurity and in India, whether it is a product, very nascent startup and product ecosystem or the large major services provider ecosystem, and how are they innovating to make India a global hub. So I will focus more on the technology innovation and the technology stack and the way it is changing in the cybersecurity domain and what is the opportunity of cybersecurity side for India. So I'll focus more on the opportunity side of cybersecurity and the innovation ecosystem. So taking off from, is it working? Taking off from my colleague Dilip from the industry, I think digitization is one way which is here to stay. It is engulfing every user vertical, whether you look at a bank or a digital payments company, or you're talking about an oil exploration company like a Cain in Rajasthan, or you're talking about any user vertical. He talked about a taxi aggregator or a food retail chain or a hotel aggregator. You look at any one of them, you really don't know, are they in the hospitality business? Are they in the retail business? Are they in the banking business? Or are they in the technology business? Currently, every user vertical, in fact, we struggle at DSCI, we do something called the Security Excellence Awards. Sometimes we struggle, putting a company in a particular user vertical because increasingly they're less of a retail company, there might be a tech company, or they might not be a learning company or an education institution, they may be in the online space, which makes it pretty much a technology company. So every user vertical is actually becoming a digital and a tech company. What is more interesting, and this is where the cybersecurity and the kind of innovation that is needed to be able to address the risks in cyber is the convergence of technologies. We have first seen that convergence in the information technology and communication space with all the revolution that has happened in the mobile. But if you look at an integrated building management system that is deployed in any one of your condos that you stay in Bangalore or I stay in Gurgaon, or you look at a smart city, or even you look at a highly automated bank, or you look at a healthcare where there's a lot of wearables that is getting integrated into the patient care system. There is so much of convergence of technologies. It's not just healthcare technology, there's a lot of IoT, there's a lot of wearables, there's a lot of patient monitoring system, even something as simple as running that I'm very passionate about. There's so much of technology in running the way, the kind of wearables, whether you look at a Fitbit or you look at a Garmin or any one of these watches. So convergence of technologies and the cybersecurity risks that it poses and the kind of the threat landscape that it exposes is something that we need to give a lot of attention. I think digitalization and the kind of cybersecurity risks, malwares, the breaches, how do you get preparedness? I think now most enterprises across the world and enterprises in India and our tech industry have geared up for that. But now I think the challenges that we have is whether it is in IoT security, when you're looking at a completely integrated command and control system in a Pune city or in a Bangalore city, what is the threats that we have? Because there is so much of technology that is getting converged to be able to service the end consumer or the last person at the last mile in a rural or an urban town in India. So in India, of course, there is a lot of digitalization. We have this aspiration of India becoming a $1 trillion digital economy. The tech industry that I represent, or I come from, the industry body, we are not only partnering and making that, also actually contributing to making this dream happen. One important feature why again cybersecurity and the attention to innovation is important in India is, in India, a lot of digitalization is also led by public infrastructure, is also led by a lot of public platforms created by government, whether it's the income tax platform, GSTN platform, the NPCI's UPI platform, some of the platforms that are getting created where the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs is talking about an urban data exchange platform. So there's a lot, or the very famous Aadhaar platform. So there's a lot of infrastructure that is getting created by as public utilities on which every consumer, every tech company, every startup, every user enterprise is riding on to make sure digital inclusion happens, or financial inclusion happens, or government to citizen services happen in the last mile. So an important thing is, it's not just when you talk about manufacturing 4.0 or IoT, or you look at smart cities, there's a whole lot of facets of digitalization that is engulfing the entire India across verticals, state government, city government, local governments, maybe even at the panchayat. So with all of this, and of course, cloud and mobility are the two big platform enablers which is helping India do this kind of massive digitalization journey across all verticals and government to citizen services at a very, and crunching time frames which probably used to take a decade is probably now taking a year or two. And we have seen that in the digital payments momentum that happened in the country in the last couple of years. So if you look at from a technology ecosystem perspective, when you look at, for example, the fourth industrial revolution, so you talk about a whole lot of IoT devices. It's not just in the manufacturing sector. We see a lot of penetration of devices and sensors, and smart cities in India is one good example of that. I'm taking a lot of India examples because we have a lot of students and profs, and we hope they'll be able to look at some of these use cases to be able to do your PhD project, guide your PhD students, or to guide your MTech students, right? So there's a lot, previously probably everything was about electronics and IT, but if you now look at what all is getting converged into facilitating this entire IoT wave that is happening, I mean, it's a big eye-opener, and from there, if you just do a deep dive on what could be the potential cybersecurity risks and what could be the potential threat surface, I mean, it is mind-boggling, and it is also worrying at a country level, at a government level, and as a technology provider or as an academic institution training students for this. Similarly, another important thing that we are seeing is that in the technology stack, gone are the days like Dilip was talking about. Some time back, they were looking at an alternative ERP platform as a threat, whereas it's no longer an alternative platform company or an alternative large turnkey service provider. There is hyper-specialization that is happening because of the kind of technology stack, and that hyper-specialization is happening in the kind of stack you consume in, the kind of stack you build, the kind of service providers you look at, or even the kind of solution areas that you look at. And if you look at banking sector, manufacturing sector, particularly automobile sector that you look at, that where India at least has a very big manufacturing footprint in the automotive sector, there is a convergence of AI, robotics, IoT, and a lot of them are using mobile technologies. You look at the in-car navigation, that ICE it's called, right? In-car navigation and entertainment that is getting deployed, not just in the high-end cars. You look at some of the new models of cars which have come in the sub 10 lakhs bracket. You see so much of not just electronics, but so much of embedded software and so much of digital that is getting integrated into it, not just in the navigation of the car, but in entertainment, in preventive maintenance, in terms of any alerts that need to be done when a service needs to be done. You look at the dashboard of even a sub 6 to 7 lakhs car, you will understand how convergence of technology is actually getting commoditized and mainstreamed. Similar happening on the online platforms. And the larger internet platforms, we don't need to talk about it, we know. But even if you look at a command and control center in a Delhi police or maybe in one of the smart cities establishments in a Surat or in a Pune, you know how much of data is getting converged and streamed for not only analysis and decision making, for monitoring, but also for a lot of analysis and real-time decision making. So that data and the kind of threats that it exposes and the opportunities to find niche cases to be able to innovate even for a young startup or a young PhD student in one of your universities is something that I want to highlight. So given being in Bangalore and coming from NASSCOM and DSCI, I can't not talk about how this, the technology penetration across the world and in India is actually changing the landscape of the technology industry in India. We used to be a $5 million industry just 30 years back, and we are almost a $181 billion industry, servicing 80 customers across 80 plus countries. And we used to be less than whatever, you know, maybe close to 0% of India's GDP, and now close to 8% of India's GDP. What is interesting is that India as a global hub for technology players from across the world, and Indian IT servicing or you know, innovating and serving the driving the digital transformation journeys of global customers across 80 countries is known. But a less told story is how India is emerging to be a, doesn't work sometimes, how India is slowly emerging to be a global hub for cybersecurity. One is the services ecosystem, whether it's the global technology players with a large cybersecurity services footprint in India, whether it's the global in-house corporations or the large technology services companies where the cyber practices are out of India, Bangalore, Pune, Hyderabad, Gurgaon kind of cities, but also the large Indian services companies who have now made cyber as a strategic vertical, and they're also looking at how do they go ahead into new geographies, into new verticals. Maybe they were all in serving a lot of banking and financial services, manufacturing, many of them looking at niche verticals in the energy sector, in the oil sector. So services is one story we've always had, and I think the India becoming a global hub from cybersecurity started with the momentum in the cybersecurity services domain. Second is the product and innovation ecosystem. Whenever we talk about security products and innovation, I think what comes to mind first is a Baltimore or an Israel or a Hague security delta. We are still a young innovation ecosystem when it comes to cyber compared to the overall digital stack, whether it's in fintech or health tech. I think we moved a long way. We moved the needle in the long way in the last 2 to 3 years, in the last 4 or 5 years. But in cyber, we are beginning to move that needle in the last 2 to 3 years. We have an ecosystem of almost 180 companies, and I'll talk about what is the kind of stack they're beginning to build on. Many of them are beginning to get apply and get granted patents. We at least know of 45 Indian security product companies and startups which have patents now, and the patents is a good measure of the innovation ecosystem that is getting matured in India. And similarly, the user enterprises scaling up their cyber investments is also creating a different domain of expertise, whether particularly in the banking sector, slowly in the critical information infrastructure, CII, which obviously are targets of big cyber attacks. And on the side of skills, I think there is good momentum slowly driven by industry bodies like DSCI, Ministry of IT, and several universities. Just take a map of how many universities had a dedicated BTech Cyber or an MTech Cyber 4 years back and do a fresh snapshot, which is reported on the Ministry of IT site now. You will know how we are slowly beginning to focus a lot on skills, but of course, there's a lot more that need to be done in terms of very niche skills, which is where universities have a big role to play, whether it is in security engineering, in DevSecOps, architecting specialized solutions, maybe for the cloud, for the mobile platforms. There's a lot more that needs to be done for IoT security, but still we are moving the needle on that. And we've been a big base. Bangalore particularly is a big base for global in-house centers, but you'll be surprised that almost 45% of global in-house centers in India are focused on cyber, and that cyber is not just doing security operations, but being actually the destination for their global SOCs or cyber defense centers, and many of them doing security R&D, security engineering out of India. All of this creates a certain momentum. So now coming to the technology stack globally, whether it's a global player, large tech companies, or the Indian young product companies, there are some niche areas in which a lot of the innovation is focused, and I think a lot of the academic R&D, you just do a dipstick of the kind of PhD, researchers that are happening across the world. You can go and map that out, or even some in some of the Indian engineering colleges and universities. Broadly, we see a lot happening in advanced forensics, because I think national security, law enforcement, and of course, large enterprises are beginning to invest in very niche forensic solutions. There's a lot happening in cloud security and using big data and analytics for threat intelligence and those kind of solutions. Slowly, not so much yet happening in India. A lot more needs to happen in the area of IoT security and DevSecOps. And the DevSecOps, I think the capabilities and the competencies are very niche. India has a long way to go compared to the kind of innovation that Israel has already established in automation in DevSecOps, application security, and all the platforms and products that they're building around that. I think we have a little more to do. India, one area where a lot of the Indian startups and product ecosystems have made a good headway is this entire behavior analytics, particularly for insider risk, employee behavioral monitoring, or overall pattern monitoring of the behavior on the network, on the way users consume the online platforms and online applications. There is a good array of solutions and a lot of research and R&D that is happening in India in that particular area. So if you look at sitting here in 2019, almost reaching 2020, there are some priorities in India in terms of a cybersecurity stack that we need to invest in, where academia has a role to play, industry has a role to play, startups have a role to play, government has a role to play. There are some areas, I think when you talk to any government stakeholder in India, as India gets prepared for a very massive 5G rollout, I think 5G security and how do you look at the entire supply chain security and the 5G security, that is one national priority that we keep hearing. Supply chain security, as the devices, Dilip talked about the number of devices. I think India is not a laggard in that, the kind of device penetration that is happening, not just end user devices, you and me using a mobile phone or a smart watch or an iPad or any one of them. We are talking about devices penetration which happens in a smart city or any one of these domains that we talk about, or in hospitals, right? So supply chain security is one area which is getting a lot of attention from national stakeholders. Similarly, how do we start leveraging quantum technologies for this entire quantum and crypto? There are one or two young startups based in Chennai and Bengaluru who are beginning to build solutions and products already hitting the customers, not only in India, outside of India. So there are a few, I'm not getting into each one of them, but at a country level, when industry does a deep dive on what should be the solution areas which India should invest in, when I say India, it is academia, it is startups, it's large Indian IT companies, and it is also government and the R&D institutions of government. I'm talking about a combination of all of them, right? Similarly, embedded security, because of this entire supply chain security, India has been not only a base for IT, but has been a big base for embedded systems in IT. You look at all of these engineering R&D companies, a lot of them service aerospace, defense, and also they serve automotive sector in a big way. You look at Pune, Bangalore, Hyderabad, you will see this. So how do you now build on that base for embedded security and the complete solution stacks, use cases that you need to be able to make your embedded systems? How do you program and do device level security when an embedded software is getting deployed, and it could be on any device, or it could be on a very large device, or it could be on a handheld device. These are some of the areas that are getting attention. If you drill down the security technology stack, you can drill it down to any vertical. You can drill it down to healthcare, you can drill it down to public services, it can drill it down to energy vertical, it can drill down to financial. In the interest of time, I'm just looking at a financial sector. In the security stack and the innovation that is needed, the competencies and capabilities that is needed, a lot around authentication, right? The entire two-factor, all of that is gone. There's a lot about multi-factor authentication, near-field communication, right? So you need to look at what is the stack and what is the emerging requirements of innovation in the cyberspace. There's the risk side that maybe some of my colleagues from the industry who are doing sessions later will talk about it. But if you look at the innovation that we need to drive, if you look at in terms of financial services, given the way transactions happen, where there's a lot of integration between your bank, your wealth manager, your UPI, your wallet provider, right? How do you take care of the privacy protection? So privacy, we always felt privacy as an area of process, right? Process control and rigor, but privacy as an opportunity area to think technology and think digital and build a solution to be able to address a use case of a potential privacy breach is something that I want to leave as part of as a takeaway from my session. Similarly, there's a lot of innovation that is needed because financial services is one thing that gets targeted the most across the world and in India in terms of threat intel, automated, how do you do automated response, right? So you look at us overall security stack, what are the emerging areas? I'm not talking about current and what is already done, but what needs to be done and what needs to be given. You look at that security technology stack, the broader one that is there on the top of the table, and you apply it to any vertical. So if you're a researcher, you're a startup in an energy vertical, or you're in a healthcare vertical, you'll be able to come to that and slowly look at what are those niche use cases, and you'll be able to discover those use cases. So globally, what is happening in the innovation in cybersecurity? For example, in Israel, lot that is happening around multi-factor authentication, lot that is happening in monitoring and understanding what's happening in the DIC and the dark web, lot happening in application security and the entire DevSecOps automation. Similarly, if you look at the recent RSA conference finalists, you will see a lot around privacy protection, how analytics and is being used for privacy protection kind of solutions, whole lot around prevention of firmware and hardware attacks, and also automation of app security. And these are just a sample set of companies. So all of this will give you a sense of what is happening globally, because if you monitor any one of them, you will understand what is the solution area that a new startup, which is getting a lot of customer investor traction from an analyst, is actually doing, and what is the business solution that is going to hit the market, which you can probably consume as an enterprise customer. Similarly, if you look at the Forbes top 10, right, there's a whole lot around the zero trust architectures, right? There's a whole new theme around zero trust architecture. When you don't trust anything, your baseline is zero trust, and you build a security organization, technology stack, solutions, process with a zero trust environment. How do you architect a solution for a zero trust environment? There's a lot of solutions around that. If you look at the latest cool vendors from Gartner, which releases this list, there's a lot around security orchestration, security instrumentation. So I want to leave this because it's extremely important as industry and academia to have this innovation map before we next PhD student going to do, or what the next startup is going to build. Because I think we're not stepping back and understanding what is the global innovation ecosystem in cyber, which is actually making very rapid progress. Similarly, if you look at in India, currently the 180 startups that I talked about, they've built solutions in these areas, right? And many of them, maybe 30–40% of them, are using machine learning, AI, maybe not all 180 of them. Yeah, some of them are using big data and analytics. I know 4 or 5 companies who are innovating a security product using blockchain, right? Similarly, many of them using AI and the entire building for the IoT security or device or embedded system security. So currently, if you scan the 180 plus companies that we have in India, product companies I'm talking about, and what is the solution areas that they're playing. If you map this, this is the kind of security landscape we have. Every day when we attend a conference like this, we discover a new security startup, we'd like to refresh this. So in the last 3-4 years, we are seeing new solutions, particularly in the user entity behavior analytics. We are seeing a lot in threat intel and deception. We are seeing a lot of new solutions in the area of cloud sec, mobile, right? For maybe 2-3 companies in the area of forensics. And many of them, if I map it to the technology stack, because this conference is a technology and there's a lot of focus around AI and all of that. So we have, this is just a representative sample, the companies which are innovating. Maybe somebody is in real-time social media analytics, somebody is doing something else in threat intelligence. But broadly, some of these companies which are leveraging AI, machine learning, and a little bit of blockchain, some of these companies. And what is interesting is almost 75 or 80% of the Indian product companies are cloud ready. They're either giving a cloud only solution or a cloud also solution, which also provides a lot of idea on the maturity of the system, right? Similarly, in terms of the global technology companies and the large Indian services multinationals which operate in 80+ countries, there's a rapid ramp up of their cybersecurity practices. Most of them, I think a couple of leaders from the industry are here, from Accenture and Infosys, who may be able to give a little more insight. Many of them are running global SOCs out of India. Many of them are beginning to establish or have already established cyber defense centers. Some of them are actually doing product R&D along with a global security major or a global technology company or a global user enterprise, right? So there's a lot of co-creation that is happening between our services and the global companies. So when you have this kind of a landscape which is emerging, if you really need to grow it to the level at which our IT industry has gone, it's extremely important that academia and industry partner in building that kind of talent pool, in building niche skill sets. I think just generic system engineering skill sets are not enough for the cybersecurity industry. We need really very niche system engineering skill sets if you have to build a solution for DevSecOps automation or an L3 monitoring automation. There are use cases are very, very different, very, very niche, and it's not a generic security. We are not trying to build an ERP for security out of India, right? We are trying to solve some very niche problems and picking up those use cases where the global innovators are focused on and start doing that in India in partnership with academia and industry is something that is important. So I've almost done. This is just to leave as an end on at a country level, because we engage both with industry and with government at a central government level and with some of the states. We have some priorities that we need to look at. We need to look at how do we build incremental security solutions and how do we build completely new innovations for domains like IoT or domains for forensics. That's one area that we need to look at. Similarly, is cybersecurity on the innovation agenda of every incubator? You walk into any incubator in an IIT Bihar, Patna or an IIT Mumbai, if there are 100 startups, I don't think even less than 5% may be in the area of cybersecurity, right? You get into an incubator or an innovator or a startup warehouse in a Bengaluru or Pune, if there are 100 digital startups, maybe 2 of them are in cyber or 1 of them. If you go to a T-Hub in Telangana, I think they have hundreds of tech startups who are doing very well, and maybe you will discover 2 or 3. So we need to put that innovation agenda for cyber in every academic institution and in every innovator and incubator. And I also, because this is a forum of an academic institution, extremely important in terms of security, system engineering skills, architecture skills, solutioning skill sets that are needed to be able to actually build a product that is feasible for market adoption. I think that's one area that I would like to do. And also the critical information infrastructure. I think gone are the days when you can build a generic product. You need to look at, is your product solving a problem in oil and gas industry? And in oil and gas, is it in the refining space? Is it in an oil well space? Or is it a pipeline, gas pipeline space? Or is it in digital payments? If it is in digital payments, what kind of digital payments area is the solution solving? So we need to get deeper if India has to achieve this aspiration of becoming a global hub for cyber. That's all I have to say.
Any questions?
Hello, good morning. My name is Sai. I'm from REVA University. From a perspective of a graduate student, an young graduate student who's a fresher in industry, I have two questions for you. My first question is, do I make a career in cybersecurity? Is it better to do it from India or do it in foreign? Since already world leaders, world countries like USA, Israel, all these people have better advancements in this field. So is it better to do a career, make up a career in cybersecurity in those countries or in India? Suppose if in India, well, how do I start? From where do I start? Because I've seen my placements also which come in. All the job roles are not at all related to cybersecurity. So this is my first question. And my second question is, you told we need niche skill sets to make a career in this field. So can you give me a little more insight on how exactly to do that?
So
like do I certifications or so on?
Yeah. So increasingly, I think India is becoming a big global hub. If you know, if I'm not wrong, about 25 or 30 global security R&D companies are now in India. Even some of the majors from any US or Israel have now opened a development center here. So there's enough R&D happening. Lot of Indian services companies have really moved up in terms of the cybersecurity practices that they've built. And it is not just pure services. Many of them have moved into an IP-led services delivery. Many of them are building security platforms, are partnering with a bunch of other ecosystem players, whether it's a global security company, a young startup, maybe sometimes even with academia. All of them are partnering with an ecosystem players to be able to build a platform. Then I talked about the 180 plus startups. So there is a emerging startup ecosystem. Obviously, those will be young product development companies. So if you're into pursuing a career line in terms of product development and R&D, I think the young startups is one base. If you're into working with large end user customer organizations, I think, and the opportunity would be in our services companies, because the services companies are offering cybersecurity services, maybe securing a bank, securing a telecom, securing an oil and gas company, right? In terms of the skill sets, I think the kind of skill sets that a large services company will look for initially will be a lot around security operations, understanding of the verticals that you are serving, right? Customer facing skills, whereas when you look at a young product company, they might be looking at more, because they're developing a product, a lot of niche development skills. And again, it depends on in what product. Let's say they are using AI and ML, the expectation will be the developers understand what is ML, they know how to code an algorithm, they know what is the platform stacks that are coming up in ML based on which you can quickly build a solution. Testing of the product for all its vulnerabilities, that's another stream that is coming. A lot of young graduates are showing a lot of interest in security testing, application testing, because that's a completely different area. We are also beginning to see a lot of openings that are coming up in the area of forensics. So I think if you're a fresher, you need to pick up one of these themes, and some of the jobs will come as you build that experience of 3 to 5 years. User enterprises is another, which is ramping up their security teams. You talk to a CISO in any bank or in an oil and gas company, all of them are building. Privacy protection and technology solutions for privacy is also slowly beginning to be an area that opened up an opportunity for our large services companies when EU GDPR came. When India's data protection bill comes up, there would be a lot of, it's a little different teams from cybersecurity, but somewhere there is some harmonization that happens. So technology solutions for data protection space is something that might actually gain a little more traction in the next 2 to 3 years in India.